Welcome to your science news update for February 27th, 2026.
Okay, first up, let's head down to Antarctica for our top story. Scientists there have just witnessed something pretty dramatic and honestly unprecedented.
So, let's talk scale. We're talking about a glacier that retreated 8 kilometers. And get this, it happened in just 2 months.
Yeah, you heard that right. Researchers at the University of Colorado Boulder say this is the fastest glacier collapse ever recorded. Hektoria Glacier lost almost half its ice in what they're calling a record-shattering event. That's just a stunning rate of loss. So you're probably wondering, how in the world does that happen so fast? Well, it all comes down to something called ice plane calving. Basically, you've got this flat bedrock under the water. The ice thins out and huge chunks of it just lift off the bottom and start to float. Once they're floating, they're vulnerable and they just start to fracture and collapse from below.
And this is the really worrying part. The big concern now is that a lot of other much larger glaciers in Antarctica are sitting on the exact same kind of flat bedrock. That means they could be vulnerable to the same kind of incredibly rapid collapse. And, that has massive implications for future sea level rise.
All right, moving from the physical effects of climate change to the policy side of things, there's been a pretty big development. The UN carbon market is now officially up and running.
So, what does that mean? Well, the very first carbon credits under the Paris Agreement have just been issued. They went to a project that's replacing old wood-fire cook stoves with cleaner ones. This officially kicks off what's known as the Article 6 market mechanism, a really key part of global climate finance. Okay, next up, we're going to see how some fresh looks at old evidence are completely rewriting history, both here on Earth and on the Moon. This is a really incredible story of survival. A new study has just confirmed that the old Irish goat, which is critically endangered by the way, is basically a living time capsule. Scientists got their hands on some 3,000-year-old goat bones, and when they compared the DNA to modern goats, guess what? The closest match was today's old Irish goat. It's a direct, unbroken lineage all the way from the Bronze Age. It really puts a new sense of urgency on protecting these amazing animals.
And speaking of re-examining old evidence, scientists have done the same thing with some rocks brought back from the Apollo missions. And they've solved a mystery about the moon that's been bugging them for decades.
So, for years, there was this big debate. Did the moon have a strong magnetic field or a weak one? The data was confusing. Well, it turns out they were both kind of right. The moon's magnetic field was mostly weak, but every once in a while it had these wild, explosive bursts of a super strong field.
And the key, researchers at Oxford discovered, was titanium. When they looked at the Apollo rocks, they found that the ones with a high titanium content, we're talking more than 6%, were linked to these powerful magnetic bursts. The low titanium rocks, they just showed a consistently weak field. It's like the moon had these brief, powerful magnetic heartbeats triggered by its geology.
Hey, just a quick moment here. If you're enjoying these science updates, we'd really appreciate it if you took a second to like and subscribe. It really does help us keep bringing them to you.
All right, now we're going to zoom way in, from planets and moons right down to the microscopic world inside our own cells, where a really fundamental idea has just been turned on its head. Okay, so inside our cells, there are these little organizers called biomolecular condensates. For the longest time, scientists thought they were just, little unstructured blobs of liquid, kind of like tiny droplets. But new research from Scripps shows that's not the case at all. They have a hidden, complex structure inside. Using some seriously advanced imaging, they found a kind of hidden skeleton made of protein filaments inside these droplets. And this isn't just a cool detail. This internal scaffold is absolutely critical for cells to grow and divide properly. And when it gets disrupted, that's linked to major diseases like cancer and ALS. This could be a revolutionary new target for treatments. And for our final story, we're diving into the strange and wonderful world of quantum technology. There's a breakthrough here that could completely change the future of communication and computing.
So, you know how a standard bit of information is just a 0 or a 1? Well, physicists have just figured out how to make a single particle of light, a photon, carry way more information than that. They've learned how to sculpt it, carefully engineering its shape and timing to create what they call a high-dimensional quantum state.
And this is a really big deal. By creating these structured photons, they can pack way more data into each one.
But maybe even more importantly, this method is much more resilient to noise and interference, which is one of the biggest headaches in quantum computing right now. It's just a much more robust system.
The upshot of all this? Well, it paves the way for things like ultra-secure, super high-capacity quantum communication networks. We're talking about moving these incredible ideas out of the lab and into the real world, building the next generation of quantum tech.
And that's your science news update for today.
We'll be back with another update in 24 hours. Thanks so much for joining us.